Hello, I'm Dr. Roger Morrison. We're back with part 8 of our TicTacToe analysis model. Again, this is a necessary evolution of the SWOT analysis tool. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll leave that on that heading page up there just for a second. And now let's just get on straight to how the this analysis tool that we've been describing, how it, or SWOT, is used in the larger context of strategic planning. Now, I've said, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. I've said that this tool is actually part of a larger strategic planning process that is cyclical. And this is the number one mistake companies make in terms of their planning processes. They don't tend to do a cyclical model. They tend to do a once and done. They do the strategic plan, write down their initiatives, they tend to make their assignments, and then the plan goes on a shelf. But this is not how it should be. So again, this actually applies to SWOT and TicTacToe. Remember, TicTacToe is just an evolution of SWOT to fix some of the concerns and issues and difficulties SWOT has. So let's start with the beginning. And you must have a beginning. Now, it doesn't matter where you come into this. If you're going to have a company that's a new company, or a company that's been around for 50 years, a company that has a strategic plan, whatever. If you're beginning this cycle, you always start with the identity of the company. What is it that you do? Your mission statement. What do you have for vision statement? What are your values you hold dear? And this gets reviewed periodically. Periodically meaning as part of the cyclical process, you would have to go back and double check and make sure that your mission still applies to you. Remember, your mission is where you are now. Vision is where you're going to end up in the near future. And the value statements are the things you hold dear. These change over time. What happens in 4 or 5 years when you achieve your vision? Well, you've gotten there, so your mission, you're not where you were, so your mission statement's automatically no good. And your vision for the future is who you are. So you need to restate your vision to a new vision statement. And you might change your values. Companies can change your values over time, especially if they change the markets they're reaching or where they're doing business. So anyway, so we start with the identity. And actually, when we go through the videos, I cover the identity blocks before we do the external and internal matrices, external and internal input factor blocks. Now, again, the internal and the external, you can do in either order. I recommend the external before the internal, especially if you're teaching how to do a SWOT or how to do a TicTacToe analysis. And so over here on the right, this is the strategic analysis. This is where your SWOT or your TicTacToe is. This is where you take your identity, which is you've done here, done in the previous step. Take your identity, look at your analysis models, Pestel, Porter's 5 forces, whatever you're using, and come up with your lists. Do your internal and external diagnostics to narrow your list down and get it down to the most important 10, 15 things on each list. And then you generate possible actions. Now, this is what we've covered in the up through the last video, which is number 7. This is video 8. We've gotten through this list of possible actions. Now, the technical term for this combined list of all the outputs from your analysis model is called the long list. The long list are simply possible things you can choose. They're not the best things necessarily, and they may be mutually exclusive, but they are the long list. That's the goal of the analysis model we've been describing, to create the long list. Now, you would take that long list and you would come down, and by the way, keep that long list confidential. Your competitors might look at it and go, hey, that's a good idea. We might do that. Don't want that to happen. So keep your possible actions confidential. From that, you formulate which strategies you're actually going to do. And we mentioned this briefly at the end of the last video. You take that long list and you do some output diagnostics. That would be the grand strategy matrix. That would be the, there's one that's called the IE matrix. There's one that's called the BCG matrix. And so you narrow that long list down to a list of items a list of potential actions that will get you from your mission to your vision. They're all valid, reasonable things you can do. They might be drastic, but they are reasonably logical. This is called a short list. Now, you've heard that term before, and this is where it comes from. When you take a long list and you eliminate the ones that don't really fit, and what you're left with is a shorter list, it's called the short list. If you apply for a job, and it's especially high-level jobs, manager types, you might be one of 100 different applicants applying for a job. And then the HR department starts weeding out people that are not qualified. They don't have experience, education. They do some interviews that personality-wise, it just don't fit. And they get it narrowed down to just a handful of people, usually 5 or less. And they say, okay, this is our short list. You made the short list. Well, that's where the phrase comes from. Anybody on that short list would be probably reasonably successful if they were selected. But you still need to choose which one from the short list you want to hire, right? You can't hire them all. So there's a little bit more steps to get it narrowed down from the long list to the short list. Your diagnostics will give you the short list. And then from the short list, you prioritize and you say, okay, based on the short list, based on who we are, what we're trying to do, what our managers think, and what we think we can accomplish, let's do these things first. I didn't say do only these things. I said do these things first. You're going to keep that short list, because if you start with one strategic initiative and it does not work out, you might find, okay, that's not going to work, and now we know why, so let's stop that. Don't put any more money into it, and let's go with the next item on our list. Just like in HR, if you're going to hire somebody at the top of your short list, what if they say no? What do? You go to the next one on the list, and you work your way down the list. Well, in strategy, it's the same way. You have your short list, you formulate your list of what you're going to do, and you state that, and it could be one thing. For strategy, it's usually has to be at least one thing. Sometimes it can be, quite a few things, not a lot. You can't do it so much, so fast. Some things are mutually exclusive. You can't do A and B, so you have to choose A or B and do that one first. If it doesn't work out, you can always do B, hopefully. So you formulate your list of initiatives, and this is what you put into your strategic plan, is the formulated list of things you're going to do as a company. Now, once you say this is what we're going to do, then you got to figure out how to do it. So you go to the next step. So over here it says implementation. First thing you do is you take some measurements. Benchmark, the idea of, just so you know where the idea of benchmarking is, and by the way, students, take notes. Years and years ago, a couple of centuries ago, probably several centuries ago, whenever a machinist in a manufacturing environment would make something, everything was made one at a time. Blacksmiths would make things one at a time. And what they did is they had a workbench, and they would make the ideal part as best they could, and they would put it on the bench, and they would, like for length, they would make a mark and make a mark. Now, when they're going to make the next one, they wanted to make sure it was as close to that one as possible, so they would do it, and they would compare it to that mark on the bench. A bench mark. It's the mark on the bench you compare something to. Or you could say, this is the perfect item. Let's sit it here. Make another one, hold it up against it. Well, which one do we like better? Well, it's not like the benchmark item. This is a little different. Well, is it better? Well, yeah, well, then that becomes a benchmark. No, it's a little worse. Well, send it back. And the benchmark is either a thing that you compare to, or it is a literal mark on the bench. And the act of making the comparison is called benchmarking. So the first step of implementing is you have to make a measurement. Let's say that one of the things you want to do strategically is we want to expand into, I'm making this up, South America, and expand revenue from South America by $2 billion over the next 3 years. Now, I worded that very carefully, okay? Because objectives have to have certain things listed. I'll go over that again in a minute, and you'll have to take notes. But you set goals and objectives, and you start with the benchmark. You have to know what your revenue is right now before you can say we're going to grow it by a certain amount. If you want to grow 20%, well, 20% of what? You want to add $2 billion. Well, $2 billion more than what? So that's what the first benchmark is. It's your starting point. And you set goals and objectives. Now, goals and objectives are not quite synonymous, but they're kind of the same thing. You can look them up in your books. Each book is going to define it differently. And I'm not going to get into the subtle differences between the two terms now. But think of goals as the end result and objectives as stages along the way. For example, in American football, the goal would be score a touchdown, win the game. The objectives would be make a first down, and then another one, make another first down, make another one, make another first down. And so objectives are kind of like ways to get to a goal at the end. But when you teach strategy, that can sometimes get lost. So what I do is I have my students give me the overall thing you're trying to achieve, call that the goal or the overall objective. And then we do sub-objectives. Each objective and the instructions for my strategy students will tell you why and what those sub-objectives are, but they're objectives for different parts of the company to support the overall objective. Now, here's the thing. Make notes. Students tend to mess this up. The objective is what you want to do. You want, and to say it'd be things like, I want to increase revenue by $2 billion over 2 years. I want to improve whatever by a certain amount over a certain amount. That's the actual objective. Now you have 3 components to that. There's the measure. That's the thing that you're going to look at. The actual ratio. What is your balance sheet line item? Don't give me the actual number. Tell me what that number represents. Like you might say it's the measure is total revenue. The measure is net income. The measure is inventory turns. The measure is reputation, results of reputation surveys. The measure might be employee turnover rates. You know, it's the thing that you're looking at. It's not how much it is. It's not how much you want it to change. It's not even a time. It's just what are you going to look at? Okay. The next component is how much do you want it to change and in what direction? So you would say, like for revenue, we want to look at total revenue or total revenue from this operation or total revenue from this market. Okay, that is your measure. And then the change would be plus some number in dollars, you know, plus or minus, like plus $2 billion, plus $1 billion, minus, you know, for expenses, minus 3 million euros, minus 4 billion pounds. The amount of change should say plus or minus, and then how much to change. Now, I suggest to my students, stick with percentages when you write these. And there's a reason for that. If you want to improve by a certain dollar amount, it's easier when you're, especially with the students, because you don't know what the actual company numbers are. It's easier to say percentages. We want to improve revenues by 20%. Stick to reasonable amounts. Don't go, we want to double total revenue. That's just not going to happen. If you're talking the big numbers, the big bottom line numbers, stick to, you know, 10, 20% change, 25% change. If you're going into a new place where you're not doing business before and you want to establish yourself, you have nothing to change from. It's like you're going to go into South America and you're not there now. Well, then you have to state a number, an actual amount of currency or whatever. But if you can, try to stick to percentage changes. It makes the numbers easier unless you are really involved with the company and have a good grip on what those numbers are going to be right this minute. So you're going to change some measure by plus or minus some percent or some amount. And then you're going to say a length of time that you expect it to take, like in 48 months. In 60 months. If you go less than 48 months, Not good. As a general rule, that's not strategic. Very rare, except in certain industries. If you're going to go longer than 6 years, not good unless it's in particular industries that require longer lead times for things. So you would say, don't say within 4 to 6 years, say within 6 years, within, 5 years. Don't say within this to this. Now, the other thing is, keep in mind, some things have to be done quicker than others. For example, if you have an objective of building a new factory to increase total revenue in some foreign country, you have to build a factory there. That's fine. But you have to have a sub-objective for accounting and finance to raise the money through stock issue or debt issue or whatever, borrow it or sell part of the company or whatever to fund that. You have to have the money before you actually start building a factory. So you can't say build a factory and have revenue cranking out in 5 years. Well, no, you need the money for the factory in the first 2 or 3 months, the factory itself in the first 1 year or so, 6 months, or probably 1 year, and then the production levels be at a certain amount in 5 years. It also means you got to have sales and marketing are going to have to have new clients in a certain period of time. They're going to have to, maybe R&D might have to come up with new products in a certain period of time before they're ever sold. R&D's got to come up with what you're going to sell before it's sold. Sales and marketing has to sell exactly the same amount of additional output that production operations comes up with. Staffing has to staff people before they can be used for production. So be real careful on those times. When you go down the major objective, that should be the longest period of time showing on your strategic plan objective. The sub-objectives cannot take longer than the overall objective they're supporting. Furthermore, it would be extremely rare for the sub-objectives to all take the same amount of time. Money to do something has to be done before you can do the something that it's going to pay for, right? So pay attention to the objectives, think them through, pretend that you are the person. I'm going to come up with a new design, and then I'm going to produce it, and then I'm going to start selling it. Well, I can't produce more than I sell because it goes into inventory. I can't sell more than I'm producing because I can't sell something I don't have. Think through it carefully. Those times are important. So an objective has this form. The objective is we're going to do this, change this measure by this much over this period of time. And that's how they have to be stated. Sub-objectives are all the different things companies have to do to get to that point. Now, technically speaking, sub-objectives can get many layers deep. For the sake of teaching, we teach the overall that the company wants to accomplish, but then we also say the major business functions want to have at least 1 or 2 supporting sub-objectives that are the ones that are absolutely necessary for that branch of the company to do for that overall objective. For example, if you're going to begin producing by building a factory in, say, China or wherever, you have to have a sub-objective for every major business function. That would be accounting and finance, who's got to have the money. They got to come up with the money. You'd have production and operations, who actually have to build a factory, and then they have to produce stuff for sale. HR and staffing has to actually staff a factory, send over maybe some expatriates, people from the US are going to go over and run the factory, or people going to go over there as workers to train other workers, whatever. So you have to hire the people, train the people. Then you're going to have sales and marketing going to sell the product. Sales and marketing might, if it's in a different culture, might have to come up with establish a sales office in a foreign place. The research and development center, your R&D people might have to come up with new products. Sales and marketing might have to come up with so many different marketing plans, touch points, social media stuff. There's all kind of stuff that everybody has to do. Just stick to the biggies. You should have 1 or 2 from every major business function, those ones I just named. Of course, there's other business functions, depending on your business. You might have a law function. You might have a an acquisitions branch in your company for mergers and acquisitions, whatever. As a general rule, though, in my classes, just stick to the big ones I just named. And each sub-objective should be worded the same way. We want to do this. That means that we want to change this measure by plus or minus this amount, a percentage or dollar amount or whatever, within or by this particular time frame, and make sure the time frames do not include a range, a hard number, because, and here's how you know this, if you worded it right. A CEO who's in a board meeting or in a C-suite meeting is going to say, okay, Mr. HR manager, your task on this sub-objective was to hire an additional X number of people by, change your X number of employees by plus this number of people in this period of time. Well, guess what? The time passed. And what am I looking at? I'm looking at your employees. How many did you hire? Did you or did you not? Yes or no, black or white answer. Did you get that done on time or not? If you put a time range in there, it's not clear. If you don't put a direction of change in the number, in the amount of change, it's got to be plus or minus. And by the way, when accounting comes up with money or reallocates money, it's never a minus. Accounting and finance almost never does a minus. And if it's a ratio, it's not accounting and finance. They can either reallocate budget money from this to that, which takes 2 minutes and it should not be in a strategic plan, or they go borrow the money, or they issue sales of stock. They increase income to pay for something. Now, if HR was tasked with eliminating something, like if your strategic plan was about reducing unnecessary workforce, well, then certainly a negative number, you'd say payroll costs, and then the amount of change would be a negative number, of course. But as a rule, if you're talking about increasing money or increasing workers or increasing the number of factories or whatever, those are positive numbers, right? Assign responsibilities. Now, I don't require that in my class because it's pretty clear who production operations is. That's your chief operations officer. HR would be your chief personnel officer. Accounting and finance would be your CFO. I mean, it's clear who those responsibilities would fall to. But in the real world, you might set these sub-objectives to be vice presidents, C-suite members. It could be in a smaller company, managers. It could be owners. It could be a bunch of different people. So you do actually assign responsibilities. And then you come up with what's called a balanced scorecard. Now, the balanced scorecard has all of these measures, these objectives that you list, but you also have some other things you're looking at. For example, you might say improve quality, but under quality, you might have, how do you measure quality? You might say number of warranty returns. You might have quality surveys. You might have a handful of different things, all designed to measure quality. Well, some are subjective and some are objective. Some are kind of touchy-feely in how you measure it, and some are black and white right off the financials. What's your total revenue? That's a black and white number. All that goes in the balanced scorecard, and the balanced scorecard should include everything in the strategic plan, plus a few other things that you may not have a strategic planning item for. For example, you may not have a strategic planning item for quality, but it doesn't mean you should not be looking at quality on a regular basis as part of your strategic planning process. This is where you monitor the key things about your company that you might not be planning to do something about, but you don't want them to get out of hand. So that's why we use a balanced scorecard here. It includes the formal objective numbers and the subjective numbers that are a little more difficult. Read your textbooks about what goes on balanced scorecard. I'm not going to cover it much in these videos, but I will cover it in my classes, or actually through some of the learning tools and some of the textbooks. So you come up with this, and then you're in a board meeting and the balanced scorecard is done. Everybody has their assignments, their responsibilities. Everybody's clear on what they have to do, and you turn them loose and you say, go and do. Or as Andy Griffith used to say, the curtain falls and time passes. And then they come back in a little bit of time. Usually it's at least once a month or once a quarter, and you do your balanced scorecard reporting. Everybody goes down the list on the balanced scorecard and says, hey, this is how we did this line item. Hey, this line item belongs to Bob over here or Mary over there. What kind of progress have you made? And Bob or Mary says, well, this is where we are. These are the challenges we were facing. Let's go down the list. And they just report. And if changes are necessary, you can talk about necessary tweaks and modifications to what you're doing as is necessary. And you'll find very quickly that, hey, you know what? We got some quality issues that we didn't have a strategic planning item for this, but we got some quality issues starting to pop up. We've had a recall we didn't expect, and that's from production operations. But then HR says, hey, you know, we've had a problem with employee turnover. We've had a problem with getting qualified people, and you'll find that they're related. Things you did not expect at all. And suddenly, ooh, guess what? We really need to take a strategic look at quality. And you instantly step into the quality planning process again in terms of strategic planning. You monitor your input factors. You've got in a big company like, you know, a Fortune 500 company, they have teams of people. That's all they do. They look at the input factors. They watch the industry. They take the industry analysts. They study the other companies, the competitors, the industry, the government, all the different governments, all the different external and internal factors about their company and other companies. They study all this and they keep up that list. Now, they don't reweight the list. They just keep up with the factors. Hey, look, we had this item here. You know, we had really good shipping logistics in the Somalia Straits, but, oh, there's an increase in piracy in Somalia. We're much more vulnerable than we were before. So they will tweak those input and internal and external factors on these inputs. And so, in fact, this graph is slightly wrong. It should say internal factor monitoring, not input factor monitoring. But the idea is the internal and the internal factors and the external factors, they're just monitored regularly. Now, notice the arrow to the right of this cell. This arrow says it loops back on itself. So you sit here and you're reporting. Every company is different, but as a general rule, at least once a year, there's a major revision. This whole thing should cycle at least once a year, but this monitoring should happen regularly. If something happens in the industry that's of strategic note, it should be just a matter of days before somebody brings it up to the C-suite's attention that, hey, this issue popped up, if not ours. This popped up. We need to think about this. What are we going to do? Do we need to worry about it now? Can we wait till our next meeting or what? And they have regular meetings. Now, in the businesses that I've been involved in, which are smaller businesses, they have quarterly meetings and they discuss this stuff. They just make a Saturday of it, sometimes a Friday or Saturday, but they have pizza and soda and the company funds the bill, and they just sit around and they just go through the list and they just review. They talk about any changes. And when it's all said and done, they look at it and go, okay, we continue and keep doing what we're doing, or we got to make changes. And then the curtain falls and time passes until you get back to the beginning. Okay, time to start our new strategic plan. We're going to cycle through. You only write the strategic plan one time. As a majority of the time, it's once. After that, you revise it as necessary. You'll find almost every time you revise it, hey, you know what? Our mission doesn't quite fit, or maybe it does, or our vision statement, yeah, we need to tweak it in light of these circumstances, or our value statements, we find that we actually have a value statement we didn't know we had, or we don't really hold to that one very well, whatever. You tweak your identities, and you've already looked at your internal and external factors, and so you're starting to look at this identity in light of the factors and the factors in light of the identity all over again, and you just go through the process. You tweak changes as you go around. Now, this process should happen annually. The entire cycle should happen at least once a year. My wife and I, even for us, we do this as a couple. We don't do it as formally as this, but we go through talking about our spiritual life, our love life, relationships, our married life. Our kids have all moved out. We've had one son passed away, get hit by a car. That made some changes to some things. We have, she has a horse and she has health issues because of the horse, come to find out. And so, you got to make some changes. Church life, finances, what kind of shape's our house in? It's a brand new house, but does it need paint? Are we, what about the interest rate on loans? How are we doing on our debt levels? All these things we go into once a year. We just talk about it. We make it a point to sit down over dinner, and a nice dinner somewhere, and we talk about these things. And then we say, okay, in the coming year, what do you think we need to do? And we come up with a list of 3 or 4 or 5 things that we need to focus on for the coming year. We try to, and some people will call that New Year's resolutions, and they really are. They're just a little more formal of, we're not going to call these I resolve to do something like resolutions, as much as, yeah, I think we need to focus energy here. We kind of got this one down pat, but not that one, things like that. So you just do this on a regular basis, at least once a year is my recommendation. And if you can do it every quarter to 6 months, that's kind of okay. Anything less than a year, anything less than 6 months is going to be really hard. If you're in an industry that evolves quickly, yeah, you're going to have to do it much more quickly. If it's an industry that takes a long time, slow to change, we've already talked about a couple of those, you can do this not quite as often. I still suggest, though, don't go longer than about 1 year without good reason. So that's how this whole process works. When you achieve a strategic goal, take it off your list, and in the next cycle, or whenever the time is appropriate, go back to that short list and say, okay, we went through. Notice you can't just jump to the short list. You have to go back through the whole process and say, okay, before we look at the short list again, let's go look at these factors that fed into that short list. Do they still make sense? You might find that, we had this on our short list, but, I don't think that's really still that appropriate for now. Given the input factors have changed, that short list item doesn't make as much sense. So you go through the short list. After you do the strategic analysis, again, you just review it, and it takes a lot less time. The hardest one is the first one. When you come up with the strategic plan, and it should be a document that's in book length. It's not just a few pages. My students, now I don't require many paragraphs except for the last writing assignment or 2. So just a few pages of actual writing. Most of it's tables and lists. But in years prior, it was nothing for me to get a 75 to 100 page document from a single student every single class. I'd be like 50 students writing 50, 75 pages. And it was nothing. They had trouble keeping it to 50, 75 pages. Some students would hit 100 pages and think, I tried to make it as brief as I could, because explaining this stuff just takes time. Finally, I finally realized if they write in complete sentences in the lists, I don't need them to explain it if I can understand it by looking at the list. So I really pushed the issue for sticking to complete sentences in the input factor lists and in the output factors. So anyway, that's how this process works. Again, over here where it says monitoring, that should say internal factor monitoring and external factor monitoring. I'll make that edit. I do plan on putting this video, making it available to my students, probably wherever I put the videos themselves. I'll probably put a link to the PowerPoint, and I will also try to change that word. So anyway, there it is. There is how the process works in the grand scheme of things. Notice again that monitoring means you monitor and you monitor and you monitor. I won't say continuous, but close to it. Oh, if you're an IS type, information systems type, this is where you find your executive information systems. This monitoring, some of these, you have people that feed your executive information system. So a CEO can come in and sit down and take one look and see what's changed every single day. That's what goes here. The implementation is where you find your management information systems. That's all right here. So there it is. And again, my name is Dr. Roger Marson. This has been the TicTacToe analysis, necessary evolution of the SWOT planning or analysis tool. I'm with the Sorrell College of Business, Troy University. I'm a strategist, and you will find my contact information there. There's my mailing address, my email address, my telephone number. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give me a call. I think I'm gonna probably upload these to YouTube so that they will be available. And once I put them there, I don't plan on taking them down anytime soon. So and I don't monetize them, which means you should not be dealing with advertisements, I hope. Anyway, it is what it is. I do plan to do some additional videos on how to do the diagnostics and such, but not right now, probably not this semester. I'll probably do those in upcoming semesters. That said, you take care. Thank y'all for being patient with me. I know these were long, and I broke them up. The previous video was 1 hour and 20 minutes long, and I talked really, really fast and covered a lot. I might make that video available also. It's already in YouTube, but if you're one of my students, you should have been taking some notes through this entire series. Well, thank you very much for your time, and best of luck to you, and we will see you doing strategy in classes or online. Take care.